Judge Alan Prescott thought he could silence attorney Pam Bondi with a fine. What he didn't expect was for her to dismantle his argument entirely, right in front of a courtroom full of spectators. It was an ordinary morning in Tampa, Florida. The courthouse, known for hosting high-profile legal battles, had no clue it was about to become ground zero for a constitutional showdown. Pam Bondi entered the courtroom with quiet confidence, briefcase in one hand, adjusting the lapel of her blazer with the other. It was supposed to be a routine hearing, nothing out of the ordinary. But before the session even began, the atmosphere shifted. Judge Prescott's gaze wasn't on her face. It lingered just below her collarbone, on a small gold cross hanging from her neck. In a tone as sharp as the gavel he wielded, Prescott made his position clear. "Miss Bondi, religious symbols have no place in my courtroom," he said. Pam stood firm. "Your Honor," she responded evenly, "you're fining me for a necklace?" The judge nodded, insisting it violated courtroom neutrality. A soft murmur spread through the room. Spectators exchanged glances. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably, and the court clerk looked back and forth between the two. This wasn't the first time a judge had attempted to control a courtroom with an unusual interpretation of decorum. But it was certainly the first time someone was fined over a simple necklace. Pam didn't flinch. "My cross is no different from a wedding ring or a family locket," she said calmly. Judge Prescott's face gave away nothing. "That's not how I see it," he replied, his voice growing tired. "Remove it, or I'll have to issue a fine." The fine wasn't what bothered Pam. It was what it represented. So instead of removing the cross, she folded her hands over her briefcase and made a decision. "Before we proceed, I'd like to address this issue formally," she said. Prescott smirked, dismissing her as being dramatic. "Miss Bondi, this hearing is about a business dispute, not your personal grievances." Pam didn't back down. "I'm also aware the First Amendment doesn't take a recess for personal opinions." That line made the room sit up. The judge narrowed his eyes, now fully aware this wasn't going to be a simple win. The court reporter's fingers hovered above her keys. Every eye was locked on Pam. She was doing something rare, challenging a judge's authority, not with attitude, but with law. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single document, placing it on the table with care. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady, "you claim courtroom neutrality is violated by my cross? What legal precedent are you relying on?" Prescott leaned back, clearly irritated, but before he could respond, Pam pressed on. "This courtroom is under your authority, yes, but that authority is not above the Constitution." She tapped the paper. "And under the First Amendment, personal religious expression is protected when it does not disrupt proceedings." The judge scoffed. "You're an attorney, not a law professor." Pam gave a thin, cold smile. "Then let's talk case law." She cited Tinker v. Des Moines, 1969, a landmark ruling affirming that individuals do not shed their constitutional rights when entering government buildings. Then she referenced West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, 1943. And then she referenced West Virginia State Board of Education v. Barnett, where the Supreme Court ruled that compelling someone to hide or remove a symbol of personal belief is a violation of their First Amendment rights. The courtroom was silent. Prescott had no response. Pam leaned forward slightly. "Would you like me to continue, Your Honor? Or would you prefer to reconsider that fine?" He hesitated, fingers drumming against the armrest of his chair. Cornered, he finally relented. "Mark the fine as pending review," he muttered to the clerk. Pam didn't miss a beat. "I'll take that as a temporary victory." But for her, this wasn't just about winning a single skirmish. It was about the principle, about the precedent, about the quiet battles that happen in courtrooms every day, and the importance of standing your ground when your rights are challenged. Outside the courthouse, news of the confrontation spread fast. A reporter covering a different case caught wind of the exchange and ran with it. Within an hour, the headline appeared online. Florida judge attempts to fine attorney for wearing a cross, but it doesn't go as planned. Pam's phone buzzed nonstop. Calls and texts from former classmates, colleagues, and journalists. But she wasn't chasing headlines. She was preparing for what she knew would be the next move. By the next morning, Pam's assistant, Lauren, greeted her with bad news. The Florida Bar Association had issued a carefully worded statement, subtly warning attorneys to respect courtroom decorum while acknowledging the right to personal expression. It wasn't neutral. It was a signal. And it wasn't the only one. Judge Prescott had filed a formal complaint against her, accusing Pam of disrupting courtroom proceedings and engaging in behavior unbecoming of an officer of the court. Pam read the document and let out a humorless laugh. Unbecoming? That's rich, she said. This wasn't about decorum. It was retaliation. Prescott had lost the argument and was now trying to win the war behind the scenes. But he underestimated Pam. She picked up her phone and called Lisa Reynolds, a national journalist known for exposing judicial overreach. "Lisa," she said, "a judge fined me for wearing a cross. When I stood my ground, he backed down. Now he's trying to punish me through the system." Lisa responded without hesitation. "I'm running the story. It'll be on air tomorrow." True to her word, Lisa's segment aired that night, and by morning, social media was ablaze. Legal scholars from across the spectrum weighed in. A Georgetown constitutional law professor called the judge's actions a blatant overreach with no legal standing. Prominent attorneys posted threads breaking down the flawed logic in Prescott's decision. Then came the announcement Pam had been waiting for. The Florida Judicial Review Board would be reviewing the judge's conduct for a potential violation of judicial ethics. Prescott, now under public scrutiny, stepped outside the courthouse to make a statement. "I have always upheld courtroom integrity," he said stiffly, "and will cooperate fully with the review." Pam watched the clip and nearly laughed. Integrity? He was still trying to play the neutrality card, but it was too late. The damage was done. Prescott had tried to strip her of her rights in silence. Instead, he'd ignited a national debate, and now his own authority was under fire. Whether or not the review board formally reprimanded him, his credibility was shattered. From that day on, every attorney walking into his courtroom would remember him as the judge who tried to silence someone and failed. Pam Bondi leaned back in her chair, took a sip of her coffee, and smiled. She hadn't just defended herself. She had set a precedent. And she'd sent a message loud and clear. If someone in power tries to strip away your rights, you don't back down. You fight back. Because sometimes it only takes one voice to change everything.